The podcast represent for the youths them. Have a right so we share for we views them. Have a mind and a voice so we use them. Tell me why them a try confuse them. And we a spread unity, spread love in your community. And that's just who we be. Yet still we face scrutiny. Make a choice, use your voice, share your thoughts and human rights. Make a choice, use your voice, share your thoughts and human rights.
Right, there's a cherry done. Jerry 3 points gone right there. So you not forget the buffing in your face no more.
As you mentioned earlier, left man and woman business alone.
That you don't need to wait until the buff in your face turn a chopping in your face.
Right. You're cruff dirty drunk extra.
Go on up.
That's a bad. Leave that last year.
See ya.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Just Tea Podcast. My name is Jamel Brown.
And Nicola Douglas.
And I'm Bethany Parchment.
Today we're on the topic of disability. So in Jamaica, as we know that disability is normally something that has faced so many issues across from systemic barriers to limited infrastructure abilities to cater for our persons who have disability across the world. And also not just that, but also limited resources. So we are seeing that persons with living with disabilities are not taken seriously for the most part in Jamaica, and more than 80% of buildings are without proper, suitable accommodations for persons facing disabilities within the country.
Yes. So before we even start off, we're going to find out what disability right is. So disability right is basically right of person with disability to fully enjoy and participate in society like any other person living without disability would do. Right, so yeah, so what are some of the rights, legislations or acts that are in place to ensure that these persons have their rights enforced?
So in Jamaica, we have the Disabilities Act, and that was recently established on February 14, 2022, but it was approved in 2014. And following the Disabilities Act, there was the Disability Regulations. The Disability Regulations was established in 2021, but even before then, there was limited legislation when it comes down to people living with disabilities in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. So the rights that it pertains to disabilities exists under the Disabilities Act, and there are four main rights. So you have the right to education and training, you have the right to employment, you have the right to adequate health care, and you have final right, you have the right to access to public passengers vehicle. Mm-hmm. And that will assist persons living with disability in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. For example, the right to education and training is very important because it also encourages institutional or training organizations to consider persons living with disabilities in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. The right to employment is important because you can't have persons being turned away from a job or being considered for a job because they have a disability. Whether they are alter, challenged, or visually impaired, we normally see that there aren't accommodations put in place or assist persons with these challenges.
Yeah.
And there is also the right to adequate health care. So persons who are living with disabilities in Jamaica deserve the utmost care when it comes on to getting treated for any health problems in Jamaica. They don't deserve discrimination or prejudice. They deserve any normal treatment as anyone else in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. Then there is also the right to access the public passenger vehicles, and that is important because you have to also consider when we're creating vehicles or having vehicles are essentially in Jamaica, we have to make sure is it usable for persons living with disabilities, because we can't have them we can't leave a certain segment of the population behind. We have to make sure that everybody is taken care of and everybody is given the same rights as everyone else. And that's why Disabilities Act is important, even though it's late to the game, and even though we have went years without legislation or anything on paper to govern what we need to do as people to care for people living with disabilities is still important. And since the establishment of the Disabilities Act, there has also been the Disability Rights Tribunal that assists with complaints that persons living with disabilities might have. There is also other things that were taken into place by the government. In 2023, the government was went into partnership with the Bureau of Standards Jamaica (BSJ) to come up with an accessibility guideline, rather an accessibility checklist to help building codes, or to help buildings in Jamaica consider persons living with disabilities, because they are also important. They also need to be considered. They also need to be a part of the conversations, the decision making.
Yes.
I think that's so important, and I'm glad that you touched on that, because you also have to examine theory and practice, and what the reality is for persons living with disabilities in Jamaica. So while we do, I'm glad that you also touched on the employment opportunities, because I know that Heart and SDA Trust, they have the empowerment program, which allows persons living with disabilities to get a job, and they would collect a stipend, and of course the employers that take on these persons, they would have to provide accommodations for them, right? You also look at the schools that are there just to cater for children living with disabilities and to facilitate a inclusive learning environment for them. However, you also have to look at how Jamaica is, the physical landscape of Jamaica, and how just walking on the street, it's hard for someone who is living with a disability. When you look at persons who are in wheelchairs regularly, no matter where you go in Jamaica, Kingston, I was driving down Hope Road the other day, and I saw a man with a wheelchair trying to navigate in the middle of the main road. Traffic is coming down, and he is trying to navigate, his way through. And you look at the sidewalk issues. We have utility poles in the middle of sidewalks. Imagine how it's hard also for visually impaired persons to navigate just walking down the street. But you also have to commend the government for certain steps that they're taking when you look at public transportation. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the new school buses, if I'm not mistaken, they have provisions for children who are in wheelchairs for them to still utilize the public service. If I'm not mistaken as well, I think the JUTC buses, some of the newer ones.
The newer ones, they do have signs that shows it's available. Those spaces are available for persons who are living with a disability. However, seeing if there's a ramp that they could wheel their wheelchair on or go up, I don't see that. I think most times you have the JUTC persons, for example, these drivers, they're coming out of the bus, parking up properly, coming out. You see them if them have to lift up the lady, they're lifting her up, lifting him up, lifting up the child to bring them into the seats. So there are accessibility being put in place. However, it still needs more action. It still needs more help. It still needs more.
It's limited.
It's limited.
So even when you also have to big up some of the high school names. I don't even remember which high school it is in particular. I think one is JC, that they do think about children living with disabilities when they are renovating their infrastructure. So that a lot of the times people with disabilities in Jamaica are so disenfranchised because we are so scared to put them out into the open. And the fear also comes from us knowing that nothing is there out there to support them, as they navigate their social life, as they navigate their everyday lives.
In society, we're looking at it. There's this thing that it's characterized as ableism. So you're basically believing that persons who are living with disability or persons with disability aren't capable of doing the same thing another person might living without disability might do. Now, when you look at it, there are things persons living without disability might be able to do easier. But it's not that persons with disability can't necessarily do if they get the necessary or
Yeah.
adequate accommodations.
I think it's a case of not equality, more equitability
Yes.
in giving persons the treatment that they deserve and meeting their needs where it's at, rather than trying to give everybody the same treatment across
Yeah.
the board. You have to be mindful of that. Some persons can't operate in this manner. Does not make them less than or make them less human. It means that they just can't operate in this manner that you expect from them.
Yeah.
But if you put things into place, it can. And at the same time, I don't want to say Jamaica can't do it. I think it's a case where Jamaica can do it. I think they have started putting things into place, but sometimes I think they forget about these things and the way of doing it. Like, for example, they might have the accessibility checklist.
Mm-hmm.
Is that actually in place?
Mm-hmm.
They might have done inspections into certain schools to make sure that they're doing trainings for persons accurately for if you're living with disability. They might make sure that some buildings have ramps, but why not do it national-wide?
Yes.
Why nationwide,
Right.
rather? Why not give it national coverage that it deserves? I feel like sometimes when you're doing some things, you're doing it for a picture moment.
Yeah.
It's not doing it, for example, okay, I need to fix this long systemic issue so that persons can have a better life. Because Vision 2030 is almost coming up. Can we say that we achieved that?
I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah. Can we actually say we achieved Vision 2030? And it's a place that we want everybody to live, not just able persons, but also disabled persons.
Yeah.
So it raises a conversation where sometimes we take certain things as people, we're able to walk down the road, we're able to see, we're able to hear, but sometimes we take these things for granted.
Right.
And other persons are having different challenges, and are they included in the conversation?
Exactly.
Because they might be well educated, but are they given the same treatment?
Exactly, because when I look at it too, it's only when these persons, most of these persons who are now even advocating, it's only when it has gone into their court that they start realize that, oh, there is not enough access for persons living with disability or persons with disability.
Yes.
There's nothing put in place at first instance to say, okay, as soon as I walk into a room, a classroom, for example, there is a person that is shadowing a student that maybe have not just like say a physical problem.
Yes.
For example, you have some students nowadays, they have intellectual issues, and sometimes they're in a class and they realize they can't even understand what's going on.
Intellectual disability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So intellectually, that's a disability as well. What methods are put in place to actually help those children? Are there shadow persons put in place to actually help them to understand? That's one of the questions that I need to ask. And are we as a society
I'm
need to
glad you
ask?
touched on that, because I realized as well, given my research, was that Jamaica has shortages of specialized teachers, trained teachers to on the different issues that persons living with disabilities might experience. And they experience one thing I realized about living in Jamaica as a regular citizen and also going through the education system, they expect that it's a one size fits all. They expect that you should learn this particular way. They expect that you should be able to be at this particular speed. But what about persons who get left behind? And I love that you mentioned Jamaica College, but what about the non-traditional high schools that can't afford to consider persons, the ramp access, certain access? Is it in their budget to do certain infrastructure improvements? So sometimes it's not just that the access isn't there. It's also, is the budget there to take care of that specific need?
Bethany, you were saying something, Bethany?
Yeah, I wanted to say that it's not necessarily only about the infrastructural challenges, but you also have to, as you mentioned, the systemic issues as it relates to accessibility of the services. So, for example, I was very surprised to know that our firefighters and I'm assuming many of our police officers too, they don't know sign language. So when I was doing an emergency GBV training, it shocked me, to be honest, when I realized that if you are trapped in a building, if you need help and you are
Auditory child.
auditory child, yes, you gonna get knocked, because if you can't reach out to somebody, if nobody that can check for you, there's no way to communicate with the emergency response team. What is going on with you? What kind of pain you feel? Where does it hurt? Which can lead to further complicating the issue, the physical issue that you're dealing with. So we also have to look at how we try to improve accessibility to social services, to justice. When you look at do we have enough sign language interpreters for assist persons? I think every first responder should know sign language. Well, even go back to the infrastructure. You look at the fact that so many Jamaican buildings, so many government buildings that we depend on for services, them full of one bag of stairs. And for me, it is very hard to go up the stairs
Already.
So you can imagine somebody that is living with a disability, how hard it is for them to even go out, leave their house, and try to access the services that we, persons without disabilities can normally.
Exactly. And it puts a toll on them, it take a toll on them, because really it's like many persons I've known, and I still know, let me say I've known anyway, many persons that I know, they basically feel depressed about it, because if you ask them to do something, they say it's not accessible to me, it's gonna take me an entire day to get to reach there, and I will have to depend on somebody, and I don't want to be the type of person. Some of them, even some of them, they're all despite their disability, they are independent persons too. They don't want to be bothered to anybody to say, okay, lift me up and put me up the step, security, or lift me up and put me up the step, sir. When in essence, you could have already have a ramp put in place for them to independently wheel themselves up the stairs and do whatever they want to, because they're humans
and they still want that autonomy.
Yeah, they want that autonomy. So I just ask for a system, for government and persons to just please do some form of what do you call that?
Accessibility checklist.
Yeah.
That when it comes down to building codes, when it comes down to making sure that transportation has that ramp or any technical accessibility that needs for persons living with disabilities, when it also comes to the fact that documents, there are certain documents that if you're blind,
they're not in Braille.
They're not in Braille.
They're
literally not in Braille. So how can I function as somebody who is experiencing a visual impaired challenge? Like, I will be flustered to see that, okay, I can't read this document that I have before me. And then also you have to look at the fact that Jamaica has been lenient and fixing these issues. Like, when are they going to fix these issues? And at what time are they going to fix it?
And it's not even just the government, it's also the private sector who has to take into consideration that people living with disabilities will want to access your services. And I don't think they think about it. And I don't think they really care to change, to encourage that culture of change within the economy. Because when someone with a disability will try to access their service, the customer service rep will say is, that we can't accommodate you, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And then they leave. Imagine somebody who come from rural Jamaica, come far, come to Kingston to try and get something, and then when they reach a Kingston, they're getting told that, so we can't accommodate you because you have a disability.
Picture this.
Yes.
A lady suffering from, a victim of GBV, that's gender-based violence.
Yes.
She has been abused for 10 years straight. However, she is so sick and tired of it, she went to the police station. whilst going to the police station, she opened the door, go in frustrated and say, all right, I am about to get the protection that I need. Go to the police officer and basically started sign languaging because this person is auditory challenged. So she have an hearing problem. No, she's there doing her motion and going in her motion. No, the police officer, so basically, I can't help you. And he's like,
And then they're gonna ask you
I
to
don't-
write down
okay,
everything.
write down everything.
everything.
Write down everything in a distraught person. What if this lady can't
Read or write.
read or write either? No. In that essence, what happened to her? She sent back,
Yeah.
To the abusive situation. Yeah.
She sent back to that abusive situation. She can't get help. Because there's no interpreter. Is there a course set in place to assist these persons that are facing these challenges? Is there a course set in place to teach certain officers to actually properly respond to the persons who are living with disability? Alright, is it?
And you know what? It's also important to note that not every disability is obvious.
Mhm.
So you have
Yeah.
persons who are living with disabilities and they are suffering
Mhm.
in their individual way, and society fails to cater to them, fails to even recognize that they are facing this issue because it is not visible, and so they are further disenfranchised.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you said that, because when you look at accessibility in terms of justice and what it looks like for persons with disabilities, and when you look at the same GBV survivors, suppose she is someone who is in a wheelchair and she has made application for protection order and she goes to the family court or parish court in her parish, there is a chance that she won't be able to go up into the courtroom because there's stairs and she has to go up.
Yes.
And what does it look like? What does justice look like for her in that moment? And as you said, we know that there are probably budgetary issues why they cannot complete the renovations as soon as possible. But we do have to look at it from the angle of where was the consideration when the urban planning was done. We are now in 2026, and it's not as if disabilities are a new phenomenon. They have been around since they predate us, right?
Yes.
And we look at the fact that this 2026, they had the chance, the government has had numerous chances to provide a inclusive environment for everybody, every citizen living in Jamaica, right? When you look at also persons who are incarcerated and they have a disability, they are sometimes placed with the general population. There is no provision for them, and you have to take into consideration
the mentally ill persons. When you look into that as well, you can't have them exposed to the other persons who are not so challenged in the prison system. It's blatantly, it's obviously harsh for them because they will be beaten, they will be abused, they will face some form of oppression in there.
But we also
Because it's there.
Yeah, but we also have to look at the fact that right now we're in a woke period. It wasn't yes, persons have always known about disability, but it wasn't something that was talked about that much 20 years ago. It wasn't something that persons had to care about 20 years ago. It wasn't something that, oh, I have to consider this, or I'm going to get called out on social media, or it's going to become this big thing. They could have easily gotten away with it. They could have easily built buildings without considering other people because it wasn't the main thing that they had to consider. So we're in we have to look at the time period as well. We're in this different time period now. We're in social media, digital era, where things are more easy. You can easily call out someone on social media through various mediums, digital mediums. You can use to state what you're going through and your frustrations. Before you couldn't do that; it was isolated, so you could have easily gotten away with that. And also, I love the points that are being drove across today, but I also believe that there is this inaccessibility that we didn't look at before. Rural versus urban. Yes, we're talking about all these challenges. And yes, there are challenges, but it's better for urban than rural. Suppose you're in a rural area. Can you speak to certain challenges that the persons living with disabilities might experience in that area versus coming to Kingston? Yes, it's very bad area as well, but there are certain things that are being put into place in urban versus rural.
It's
also,
more
rural
accessible.
is in that isolated area where a lot of things are not being called up on. So people are seeing this and they're like, people are seeing it, but they're saying, oh, that's just regular life.
Yeah.
That's just a regular day.
Yeah.
That's just that, but nobody's calling it out.
Yeah.
It's not something that they would call it. So it's something that becomes a part of the norm. You know, that wrong thing that becomes everybody's thing to do is like some along the way disability became the people living with disability and how they're treated became the wrong thing in our culture, but it wasn't sorted. Became the wrong thing where they deserve the same rights, they deserve the same accessibility to buildings, but they're not given that. That wrong that we have seen, we have talked about, but nothing has been done about it.
When you look at the fact that persons with disabilities who are incarcerated, physical disabilities, you look at the condition of the lockups and the prisons, and you think about if they do have access to sufficient medical treatment, you know, is the consideration there for those persons who may not be who will need additional care, you know, and support.
That's a really good point, Bethany, because yes, they would have committed a crime, and yes, we all have human rights, but that doesn't mean yes, their human rights might have been diminished a little, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve the same rights that we do. So they do deserve quality medical treatment in that facility, and also it's good to separate persons who are living with disabilities from persons who are not in the facility. For example, if persons is going through a mental health challenge, you want to be able to make sure that they get the treatment that they deserve in an isolated capacity, rather than making it this general one-size-fits situation where you know that everybody needs the treatment that they deserve. Everybody have the same rights.
So,
Sorry,
and you have some of them, some instances when we hear about our disabled persons in lockup, how much, how maybe volatile they might be, and as a result of that, the system is basically retaliating by withholding their medications and all kind of things, all kind of health service. Well, that wouldn't be the best method to use to punish a person. There are humans too as well. So I think there should be a better punishment system that can be used to deter the person from committing an act. But then again, they are already in prison. So why withhold their medication and their health service from them? That's something that we need to ask ourselves. And it has been happening.
And we need to address it as well. We need to make sure that it's getting the spotlight it deserves.
Yeah, it has been happening.
I also want to go back to what you had mentioned when we talk about the disparity between rural persons and urban persons, and what it means about how the barriers to accessing justice in particular. And you think about in Kingston, everything is so near. Even though you're kind of far, you're kind of near. You know, everything is so centralized. But say for example, me live Upper Woy in a Manchester, and I come from Manchester, so I can use Manchester. Me live Upper Woy in a Manchester. Me not have nobody to carry me go police station. Me make one little phone call to the police station. More than likely, we probably not get through still. If I am visually impaired, how do I mean, there are ways around it still, because they know how to navigate, you know, technology and digital devices. But is there something implemented by our first responders for persons with disability to contact them immediately, no matter how far away they are from the physical location? You know, something that facilitates them being able to communicate in any way possible. That is, you know, when you think about the lack of transportation that is available to persons in rural areas, anything happen to you at night, country them? Anything happen to you hours at night, you have to go wake up Master John, well, live down the road and making carry go to hospital.
How far down the road?
Sometimes you have to go walk 20 minutes. Hopefully you live back on you so you can just go around and back there.
Oh
But
my
for a lot
God.
of people it is very hard, and we have to really consider how large the gap is for rural persons. And I know that when you're in Kingston and you're on social media, everything just seems so easy to get to,
Yeah.
you know. But when you live in a rural area, I mean, like, you drive for 40 minutes and you don't see no street light, no stoplight, no
Pure bush.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
What is life like for persons living in that area, especially when they are faced with a disability?
Yes. Is there a system put in place that can do check-ins? If where we look, there should be a system. Is there a system put in place that could do periodical check-ins? For example, persons who are living with disability but don't have any person to take care of them. Is there a system in place that could basically ensure that they are checked upon and they have their proper access to health, food, and the basic necessities of life? Is there?
I think I know that the Ministry of Labour and Social Security will have social workers that will go out into the field, but I'm not sure to what extent.
To what extent it is being
You know,
done.
and when you look at organizations such as like the
Jamaica
Jamaica
Council for Persons with Disability.
Yes,
yeah.
and you have the Jamaica Association for the Deaf,
Mhm.
and you have the UA Disability
Disability
Center
Center.
that specifically caters to the needs and provides psychosocial support to persons living with disabilities.
Yeah.
I know they have somewhat filled that gap, you know,
Mhm.
that the government unfortunately has left us.
Yeah, unfortunately, government has left a big gap, and these organizations have done so much. Like the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities has worked hand in hand with the government to form the Disabilities Rights Tribunal that helped persons living with disabilities to send their complaints in, and for them to get some help that they need when it comes to certain wrongs that are happening in Jamaica, because we do have to consider persons living with disabilities. We have to consider all forms of disabilities. Intellectual disability, altered challenge, visual impaired, and any other disabilities that might exist. We need to consider them for persons, whether they're old or young. They also need the support.
Yes.
Just as us that need the support, whether it comes out to education, healthcare, and also our rights, they also need that support.
And as you mentioned that, we also need to talk about the employment area, because under the Disability Act, the employer should not
Yes.
terminate the person simply because they on the grounds that they have a disability,
Yes.
where it's not justified.
The right to employment.
Yes, so in scenarios like that, we know these rights exist. And I'm encouraging our persons living with disability to read up, and if you cannot read up on the act again, we will have to get somebody to assist you in that area. But yes, it is a right for these persons not to be denied employment simply because of their disability. For instance, a man basically use a tractor and he get injured on the job and no longer can use his leg. Will that organization now terminate that person? No, they shouldn't do that. After that person can maybe go through rehabilitation and get back into the system, could they now be placed into office work if that body has an office system in
Yes,
place.
but they also need to have rehabilitation services in case. For example, like if he's going through that, he needs time off from work, he needs paid leave, he needs support for rehabilitation. We can't just focus on the job aspect. We have to also consider that he needs the time and it needs to be paid for.
Yes,
for him to be accommodated because he was injured on the job.
Exactly.
And also we need to look into place where we have rights versus reality versus fiction.
This is the Just Tea podcast, and on matters that we discuss, we want to hear from you. So, go on our page at JA4Justice, find the episode or all the episodes for that matter that you like, and comment. Give us recommendations and let us know what you think about the matter being discussed. See you soon.